Welcome to the Jamodi podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Ballogy. Manage and measure your players' skill development and increase accountability year-round utilizing the Ballogy app. Boost inter-squad competition with drills backed by the National High School Basketball Coaches Association, including a 40-shot Ballogy skills assessment. Please visit ballogy.com/teams for information on how you can provide this resource for your team. One thing I've always appreciated about you is I feel like you are a student of the game. And as coaches, that doesn't stop. We ask our players to be students of the game, but we have to continue. So you're constantly about players, about coaches, teams, schedules, but I would assume also that you have some coaches and leaders that you like to follow and learn from. So who are some of those guys?
Absolutely. As I was, thinking about that, one of the things that was funny, I was like, oh, it's this coach and it's this leader and it's this, and I thought, okay, I probably need to reevaluate just a second. And the right answer and the real answer is, one of the leaders I follow closely is Jesus. And I try to live that out in my program. Just the statutes that he has set out for living just a productive life. I feel like so much of my job is using basketball as a tool to get, not just the basketball kids at the school, but just kids at the school in general, to see like, oh, wow, maybe I've heard that, or maybe I've heard it growing up, but Coach Duke or, our football coach or volleyball coach, whoever it is, like, man, they're really living that out. And I can see that in the way, I always say this, it's the way we talk to our players.
Nice.
It's the way we talk to officials. Yeah. And it's the way that we talk to parents. And I'm not sitting there, sharing Jesus with them every day, maybe in a one-on-one conversation, but I can do that by the way that I do those three things. And so, as I was thinking about that, I thought that's probably what I need to lead off with. And then we can get to maybe some of the less important stuff later on. But,
I'll go ahead and jump in after that first one. So first, you're right on the money, especially, being at Christian schools, we have the luxury of getting to be open and honest about our faith. And I'm sure your school's the same way. At our school, it's a mandate that we do share and that we do live it out. You beat Michael Scott in your order of leaders, because I believe in season 1, I think he had God at 3 or 4 on his list, and so you beat.
I learned from that. Yeah, absolutely. Great leader, Michael Scott.
That's right.
There are some nuggets there for sure, but no, I think one of the coaches that I look up to in terms of how they run a program, what they run offensively and defensively, just somebody that I look up to is Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, which will be funny. Obviously, my last name is Duke, but I grew up a Duke fan. It's kind of hard not to be, right?
Sure.
And one of the things that he said that stuck with me is something along the lines of everybody's ideas should be heard, and it doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as it's the same mission. I feel like I try to live that out with my assistant coaches. It's so much more than, that's a great idea, but I make the final call. There's a little bit of that in there. There kind of has to be. Yeah. But when we're running practice, when we're in games and I'm turning around and I know, like, oh man, like that guy's a really good in-game adjuster. Like, hey, what do we do? What's not working? What do we need to change? I'm not taking that sometimes. Like sometimes I'll take that information and then I'll kind of, okay, I'll listen to it. Then we'll get into huddle at a timeout, quarter break, and then I'll present the information. But probably 75-80% of the time, I'm like, you're saying that in the next huddle, right? Because it doesn't matter who it comes from. All of the kids respect us. All the kids know what we're, that we sometimes know what we're talking about. But I think that empowers our assistants. And then I think what that does as well is that empowers our players, right? I mean, player-led programs, like, that's what we want. And if a kid comes off the floor, shooting a free throw, and I'm yelling at, hey, come over here, because I'm about to bless him with some wisdom. And he's like, hey, have we thought about running this? Or have we thought about this? And I'm like, oh, actually, that's what I was going to say. Or no, but that sounds better than what I was going to say. So let's do that. I feel like when we all share the same mission and the same purpose, it shouldn't matter who says it, and it shouldn't matter really who gets the credit, as long as we're doing kind of what we're doing. So
It's really good. And the self-awareness that you have to be open to what your assistants have to say in their thoughts. I think early on, one of my biggest faults or deficiencies as a coach was not, I didn't even give them an opportunity. There's a timeout and I just charged into the huddle, and whatever was on my mind, that's just what we did and ran with. And it took a mentor of mine, Dave Bonnell, that was one of my older assistant coaches, that just made a comment of, hey, he asked, do you want me to ever give you input? And I was like, sure, I do, coach. He's like, okay, well, it doesn't really seem like that.
right.
And like, thankful for him to open my eyes up. And then, but you're right. Like, we want investment from our players. We also want investment from our assistant coaches. And one of the best ways is to allow both of those parties to be heard, and not just lip service, but actually take it, think about it. Ultimately, we do have, and we let them know we have the final say in the direction, but really take it to heart.
Yeah, and that was one thing, as an assistant, I got that modeled to me, in a really really good way, and it talks about one of the other one of my coaches that I follow and leaders, Jeff Bell. He was only at Fort Worth Christian 1 year, and I was his JV coach and varsity assistant, and we have very different styles of how we play, how we coach, but I really really respected his style because I knew it was his and I knew it was authentic. And I had to find my footing there for a little
Yeah.
while. Like,
Yeah.
what does he want? What does he not want? And then one day I just kind of said, like, the worst he can say is no. The worst he can say is in a closed door meeting, like, hey, I need you to back off a little bit. And I was like, I'm going to be open to that criticism if that comes. But the more I kind of found my voice and started showing, him stuff, like in a locker room or in his office, and he was like, oh, okay, I kind of felt like, man, I feel like I'm kind of gaining my voice. And then I remember one time on a bus ride, I think we were going to Joshua to play, and he kind of said, like, hey, I really kind of value what you're saying on the sideline, and I want you to continue to do it, and I'll tell you to stop if I need you to stop. And I said, yes, sir, I got you. So that was modeled to me really well. But I also struggled with that my first couple of years, as a varsity head coach, of maybe thinking that I wanted that, but maybe not making it known to my assistants with words. And sometimes that's what's needed. Not everybody's just going to pick up on who you are and what you like. And the same goes for players. I mean, we have to over communicate what we want from them. And so that was one thing I learned for sure. I think, one thing to hit on too, I went to Grace Prep. I'm very blessed to be back, at Grace Prep and be the head coach. And
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah.
it really is. And it's an answer to prayer, but not necessarily something that it wasn't a prayer to get out of the situation I was in. I loved where I was, but just an answer to prayer of something that I really had kind of like on a bucket list, like, man, it'd be really cool if one day I could go back and kind of be a part of the program that shaped me and formed me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And praise the Lord that has happened. But, three guys that are at Grace Prep, two of whom I played for, and one of whom, was the coach, there before, I got the job, Chris Hall, Ray Forsett, and Richie Alfred. There's only been, four head coaches at Grace Prep.
Yeah.
And I'm the fourth, and it's really cool, to know that I have a professional relationship with Richie, but then to have also played for Ray and Chris, and just kind of know the tradition and the legacy of what we want to do at Grace Prep, and who we have been in the past and who we want to be in the future. I just feel like, I mean, it almost feels like a lot sometimes, of like, man, I'm kind of taking that on, but at the same time, we share this common bond. And I, before we were at the state tournament last year, I called each one of them and just kind of thanked them for the advice they had given me over the years and the impact that they had on my life, but also to let them know that, like, man, Grace Prep's an open door for you guys. Like, anytime you want to come back and share with my players, I would love that because I know how much they shaped my life.
Man, there's a good nugget there, and something that I've thought of doing at Faith, like at the Colony High School where I went.
Right.
It's easy. Tommy Thomas, Cleve Ryan, like those two guys, and I happen to play for both of them. So like I get that feeling there. At Faith, there are quite a few coaches before me, and I don't know if I've done a good job. So I think the nugget for me is to be more intentional with connecting the past coaches, but also the past players.
Right.
Because even something like our record board,
Yeah.
unfortunately, there weren't any records kept before I was here.
Right.
So it starts with my first year. For a former player, you walk in the gym maybe and you're like, oh, what the crap? Like, we're not even a part of this.
Right.
Maybe I need to do a better job of digging and finding them. So that's good.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And no, that's a great point. I think the more that we can do, and you do a great job of this. You do your alumni game. I mean, you do engage in a way that is inspiring. But I think the more that we can connect those things, I mean, one of the things that we're trying to get, our guys to ultimately do is to buy into something that's bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And when you can kind of like open the box a little bit and show them like, man, like we had some really good players come through here, or maybe they're not the guy that's going to be on the record board, but like, man, they were the glue guy on this team, and like Faith basketball, Grace Prep basketball meant more to this guy than anybody, but you're never going to see his name up on a record board. Like that's a great way of engaging that guy to come back, but also maybe that player on your team that kind of fits that role now, and they're right on the verge of like, am I buying in? Am I not buying in? That may be something that they're like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. Like I'm going to buy into that role now.
What are your thoughts of this? And something I've been thinking about doing, kind of, because in college, obviously, there's a Baylor Athletics Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And sometimes at high school, like I think at the Colony, Darren Williams jersey is retired. They better have a statue of him outside the gym. Like that's kind of how I feel about him. But what are your thoughts on almost doing like a Hall of Fame, but where they come back, they get recognized, we have like plaques and things, maybe in a hallway somewhere or in the locker room. But the hard thing would be like, what's the criteria for that? Because if it's only the guys that scored a lot, well, while they were here, they were already getting that praise, and we probably talk about them. But what are your thoughts on maybe doing something like that for a high school program?
So we have something similar kind of to that, and it's something that you kind of have to tend and care to, if that makes sense, because it's one of those things where if you let one person in, then it's kind of like, well, who's the next one? And then for me as an athletic director, now I'm like, okay, well, it can't just be boys basketball, right? Like it doesn't look real like if the whole Grace Prep Hall of Fame is just boys basketball players.
That's true.
But if you're doing it like as like we call them legendary Lions, and right now we have two. It's Isaiah Austin and Emmanuel Mudiay.
Fair.
Absolutely.
When's your legendary Lion?
Oh, I
it's tough.
I have to be there for 30 more years to even be considered. I'm not sure. So.
You've kind of taken yourself out of the running, being the athletic director now.
Right. Yeah. Like, am I going to nominate that's going to be a rough. It's going to be a rough one. Right. That's
guys, make sure everybody comes. I've nominated myself for legendary Lion. That'd be funny.
Yeah, party of one has nominated.
It's funny. Terrence, I don't know if you know the name Terrence Thomas. He played at Baylor with me my junior and senior year. And so thankfully he was a part of that group that, we stuck around and survived. But over the years, I mean, I feel he called me a few days ago wondering like, when him and I were getting into the Hall of Fame, and when, they don't remember us, they don't do this. I was like, Terrence, like he actually scored some points, and he was a player of the week in Big 12 player of the week one time. Yeah. But I said, Terrence, like I averaged 4.5 points a game. Like I played hard and I took charges, but like, in my opinion, that's not Hall of Fame worthy. Right. So I'm not holding my breath. But
I'm with you on that one too. No, but we do that, and we've got we have their numbers retired in our gym, which I think is a pretty cool thing. And that's another thing too of trying to connect the past to now. I think we do a really good job of that. And Grace Prep has been blessed to have some pretty talented athletes in all sports roll through, as a lot of schools do. And so, we're in the process of kind of adding to that as well. One thing that we actually just did that was pretty cool. We had a volleyball coach that was there for 24 years, from 92 to 2016, when 92 is when the school opened. And we kind of have a wall of fame, if you will, and we have little gold plaques, and it's really for any family, that I think has like 10 or more years at the school, and
Nice.
put their names up there. And we were able to honor her at a volleyball game just maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and got her back on campus, and was able to honor her in a really really good way. But our volleyball coach now, she actually coached with her during that time and is very connected. And so it was cool to kind of see, like, that's something that I would put emphasis on with my basketball program, of like really bringing everybody back together, because we don't have that long of a history, 30 years. And the fact that our volleyball coach did that, I thought was really cool. So
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.